hörst den Mental Power Podcast, der Podcast mit Tipps zu Mentaltraining. Behalte in Extremsituationen die Nerven und sei erfolgreich mit dem, was du tust. Gewinne neue Einsichten und baue emotionale und mentale Stärke auf. Hallo und herzlich willkommen zur 4. Folge des Podcasts. Du wirst heute ein Interview mit Adcock hören. Er kommt eigentlich aus der UK und lebt aber mittlerweile in der Schweiz. Deshalb wechsle ich jetzt auch über in die englische Sprache, weil das Interview auf Englisch ist. Today you're gonna listen to Adcock. He's actually from the UK but lives in Switzerland by now. He's a paraglider, a speedflyer, an alpinist, and an adventurer. And at the beginning of this interview, he will talk about himself, how he found his way into sport through parkour, which he practiced more than 10 years. And we're talking about different questions later on, so please stay on it. It's really interesting. He talks about difficulties which he encounters in his sport and also about fear. We also talk about flow and competition, what he thinks about mental training or mental strength. And he will give you some tips for yourself. Then at the end he will talk about his further plans for the upcoming year. So please lean back and enjoy the show. I'm very happy that you're here in the podcast with me.
It's good to be here.
Super, thank you very much. You would like to talk about yourself. What have you done? When did you start it with your sports?
Yeah, as long as I can remember, I've always been quite an active and outdoorsy person and always doing weird, random things, I suppose. But when it comes to actual getting into legitimate sports, I suppose, it was probably in my teens. I started with parkour when I was around 15. And that's been something that I did for quite an extensive period of my life, probably about 10 years. I think I did that for. Yeah, I travelled around a lot of England and Europe doing parkour events and various different things. But then as I've travelled, it sort of evolved into other sports and other things have taken my interest and it sort of took a back seat. Yeah, in terms of sports, I guess paragliding is probably the next one from parkour that really struck me. I mean, parkour was something that I was obsessed with. You know, it's every week, like 5 days a week, 6 days a week, I'd be out doing something, training, whatever. And then after that, I picked up other sports, and I've always been someone that likes to try different things, but not many things really stick with me that I actually really want to pursue. But then, yeah, paragliding was the next one to come along from that. And it's kind of funny because I moved to Switzerland in 2016. And when I first got here, the original plan was to start learning to skydive because I wanted to get involved in wingsuit base. That was actually, at the time, that was the vision I had in my head of where I was going. But it was kind of strange because I ended up doing a paragliding tandem flight, about 2 weeks into being in Switzerland. And the guy that I was talking to who took me on this flight, he was basically explaining how he got into paragliding and what he liked to do with paragliding and where it had taken him and things like that. And all these ideas that he'd either done or was talking about and how the sport could be used, not just not as like a flight down from a mountain, but a way of actually transporting yourself around the mountains and really exploring the place. It really sparked something in me. And that was something I just got hooked on. So I just got really into that. And wingsuit base and things like that sort of fell to the side while I was focused on paragliding. And then somewhere along the lines, in the early days of me learning to paraglide, I learned about something called speedflying. And this was something that was sort of, it ticked the boxes that wingsuit base was going to. I love speed sports. I love going fast. And it's hard to explain, but I want to call them line sports. It's like where you have to visualize your route. You visualize a line way before it happens, and you have to sort of predict, because of speed and everything going on, where you're going to travel and what's going on around you at the time. And yeah, speed flying was one of those things where you had to visualize your line. And it was something that really hooked my interest. And yes, I started paragliding and I went through the route to gain my license in Switzerland, and always having the idea of speed flying being the main objective, so to speak. So it was where I wanted to go from paragliding. And yeah, I did paragliding for 2 years. I spent a lot of time doing acro and other areas of paragliding just to improve wing handling skills and things like that, until I felt confident to move on to something smaller, edging my way towards speed flying. And I downsized quite slowly. I moved on to smaller mini wings, they're called. So they're not quite speed wings, but they're not paragliders either. It's just a weird hybrid, a little bit faster, a little bit more agile, but just more of an easy step into that world. And I got really comfortable with that stuff. And then, yeah, after that, it was sort of, okay, what's the next step? What do I downsize to? And then eventually I worked into speed flying. And that I've been doing for 2.5 years, I think now, something like that. Mm-hmm. So I started on quite a big speed wing and just learned all the basics and made all the rookie mistakes you make in the beginning, and definitely beat myself up a bit, crashed a few times and whatever else, just trying to figure out how to actually fly these things safely, if there's such a thing. And yeah, it's been a long process, and I signed up with a speed flying course a little bit later on to sort of really dial in my technique and fill in the gaps that I'd missed from the stuff I tried to teach myself, basically. So I did that, and then I moved on and progressed onto smaller wings. And yeah, I've been doing proximity flying and hike and fly in the Alps here, quite a while now. So yeah, that's where I'm at now, I guess.
Who's teaching you?
Most of it is self-taught. The paragliding, I went through a school, learned all that. There's a very strict system in Switzerland, so they require you to go through a very set route to get into paragliding, and you have to have a Swiss license for insurance reasons and things like that. So yeah, I went through Born to Fly. It's a local school here that I did my tuition with. Yeah, got my paragliding license, and then speed flying, you're not meant to, but I kind of taught myself for the first 6 months. I spent pretty much the first summer just teaching myself, just doing a ton of research, reading what I can, watching videos on YouTube and stuff like that, and taking what I knew from paragliding and trying to transfer it to that. And it worked to an extent, but I knew that I was getting into a dangerous sport, and it was something to be taken seriously. It wasn't through choice that I taught myself. It's kind of weird. So in Switzerland, the Swiss licensing system, up until very recently, you've only been able to learn and get the license by speed riding. So you had to combine it with skis. At the time when I was starting to or wanted to do speed flying, my skiing level wasn't at the level I wanted it to be for speed riding. And speed riding it's not really interested me. It's not really caught me as much as speed flying, where you foot launch, has. So it felt like a bit of a waste of time going down a route that I didn't actually want to go down just to get the license. So I thought I'd try and figure out what I could on my own, get advice from people who've been in the sport a while, and try and figure it out myself that way. And I kind of got lucky, because in the same year that I was doing this, the first foot launching course was set up in Interlaken, chill out paragliding. So I actually signed up to them as soon as I could. So I'd spent 6 months basically trying to wing it and figure it out as I could. And then this course came along, and I was like, perfect. I can get some solid knowledge from people, fill in all the gaps that I haven't figured out or I'm not aware of, and go into it that way and get my license, get all signed off, and make it all legit. And that's what I did. So I learned that way. And then in regards to mountaineering and things, I've done a couple of courses here just for ice climbing and understanding how to set up anchors and whatever in ice and glacier crossings. But mainly it's stuff that I'm learning myself. The way I sort of go about my learning approach is to sort of see how high I can get, basically, and then what stops me getting any further. I have to try and assess why I can't get any further. What am I missing? Is it equipment? Is it ability? Is it experience? Whatever else. and then go away and think about how to solve that problem. So whether that is taking another course and learning from someone that way, or whether it's a case of getting the equipment and trying things out and just seeing how it works and seeing where that takes me. So that's the other approach I've sort of taken to things when it comes to mountaineering. And then, climbing again. The rope stuff I learned through a course, but the rest has just been from me just messing about and from a young age, basically climbing on everything. So
sounds great. Wow. And what mental difficulties do you encounter there on your trips or in your board?
I guess it depends. I mean, at the base of all of the sports I do, I mean, they've all got a level of risk to them. There's always that involved. So fear is really the main difficulty that you face. And this is something that I really got from parkour. And I mean, like I said, I've climbed from like a very young age. And from what I've been told, I seem to be pretty fearless from a really young age, just climbing or whatever and not really caring about heights and stuff like that. But parkour was really the time when I actually sort of faced fear and tried to understand it. Like I identified what it was, why I have these fears, and tried to rationalize it and really try and figure out what there is really to be afraid of and what there isn't. And it was quite a big a turning point for me in parkour, and just understanding the rationalizing fear and ways of making progress in the sport where there is a level of risk and there's a level of danger. You can always get hurt doing these sports, but there's understanding when, yes, you're definitely going to get hurt, and when it's just in your head saying you might get hurt. And you have to understand your own abilities. You've got to be very honest actually with yourself about what you can and can't do. And that's really the basis of sort of dealing with that fear, I guess. So it's like baby steps. You do a small jump and you figure out, okay, I can do that. That's comfortable. That's not a stretch of my abilities or anything like that. And then maybe try a bigger jump. And you're like, okay, it's getting near like how far I can actually jump and things like that. So it's sort of, I mean, fear is a key player in all the sports that I've done, but it's always been about making little progress and being patient with it and just trusting the process. So you spend some time just working on all the fundamentals, and like parkour was a real interesting one because in the beginning you look pretty stupid. Like you'd literally be jumping on steps, for example. So there'd be steps outside in a park or something like that, and you'd be jumping between steps. And to people walking by, they must think you look pretty special doing what you're doing. But it was all the idea was to basically associate ground level ability with ability higher up. So if you could do, I don't know, a 10-foot jump at ground level between two curbs, what changes when you go up to a higher level? What happens when you're on top of a building? The jump hasn't changed. It's still the same size. It's all in your head. And it's this constant battle of rationalizing this fear against experience. And you've got this. You've done this jump a million times at ground level. You've done it on stairs and things like that. You've watched the people staring at you, laughing at you because you're just jumping around on stairs. And it's like you've done it enough times to know that you can do this distance. And then it's when you're stood on the edge and you're looking down at 3-4 story drop that you've then got to really control the fear and appreciate that you can do these things. And it takes some time to get that, and it's not an easy process. And I think even when you're like at the top of your game and you've got things down, there's still always these little moments where it's there's always a little bit of doubt. I mean, everyone makes mistakes. There's always human error involved and things like that. But it's sort of it's appreciating that you have the capability of doing something, and the circumstances may have changed, but your abilities haven't. And it's something that then carries over into the other sports I've done. A lot of the things that I've gone into from parkour, it's sort of it's built a foundation for me to be able to overcome fears within those sports very quickly. So although there's new fears, with paragliding and speed flying, you're suddenly, floating around with a few thin wires above your head sort of thing. Like, things do change, but then in terms of the whole process of learning with these small steps to get big results further down the road, it's the same sort of principles that I've followed in all of the different sports that I've done. And it's always just been about testing my limits, but trying not to overstep them. I mean, occasionally you make those mistakes because, I don't know, you're not quite on it that day or whatever. It's more of an art than a science. You try and figure out where your limits are and stay within the safe zone, but still make progress. So, I mean, I spent a lot of time, I knew speed flying was something that I wanted to get into for a long time, and I knew how dangerous it has a reputation for being a very dangerous sport. So I spent a lot of time on my paraglider doing a lot of acrobatics and wing control practices, just so that I felt even more confident in my abilities moving into a smaller wing. Sensitivity required to fly these small wings, all the different interactions, the way you control a wing, it all translates down from a bigger to a smaller wing. It's just the consequences of things going wrong on that wing when it's that size is so much more drastic. So having a paraglider where it's nice and big, they're a lot slower, a lot more docile. You can really play with them and you can figure out how they work. And I spent so much time effectively breaking the wings and then figuring out how to fix them again. So when it came to going down to smaller wings, going down to the speed wings, I was able to just translate that knowledge across, and it just gave me so much more confidence in my ability to fly them. I mean, there's been instances I've had close calls and things where the difference between me still being alive and not has come down to all the work I put in with paragliding. So it's a huge benefit to sort of really focus on the foundations, and you drill the easy stuff so much that it becomes instinctive, so that when you go on to the harder stuff, you don't have to think about the next step. It's there for you. So yeah, it's a bit of a mental game sometimes. I mean, people die in the sports, and that can have an impact. I had a few friends die the past year or so, and that had a bit of an impact in terms of how I assessed risk and how I dealt with the fear involved. Because although, from parkour, I've had this whole foundation of how to overcome fear, and it's ingrained in me. There's now a new aspect that I haven't had to deal with before. Speed flying is one of the first sports I've been in where I've known people to die in it. Other sports, people get injured. I know people breaking bones, paralyzing, whatever else, but death was a big one. And it's one that it took a little while to sort of be able to rationalize why I'm doing this. It's really hard to sort of know that someone else has done the same things as you have and they've died doing them, and then be like, okay, I'm still going to do this. It sounds insane to most people. It's a weird one. So that was one that I had to really think about. And death's a strange one when it comes to these sports, because I know people with a lot of experience, way more experience than me in these sports, that have ended up dying. And I know complete beginners that have done the exact same thing and they've survived. So it's a really weird one where it's almost a roll of the dice. Like, it's as much as you can prepare for everything and you can be as good as you want to be, when your number's up, your number's up. So for me, as much as I know people who have died in this sport and people have got injured and things like that, if I want to enjoy this sport, I can't focus on that so much, because it doesn't matter. It's going to happen either way. So for me, it was one of those things where I just had to sort of, be respectful of the sport. It's really good in a way, because complacency is a big issue with these sort of sports. Things that you've done routinely a lot, you do get a little bit complacent, and that's usually where the accidents happen. So it can be a real wake-up call just to pay more attention to what you're doing. So that's one thing I took away from it, and it's sort of something I do with my launches every time. Is I always sort of take a little bit more time before I start, because once you're in the air with a speed wing, that's it. You're committed to it. You know, you're airborne, that it's not like a car where you can just put your foot on the brakes, pull over to the side of the road and get out. It's game on. So yeah, so you have to sort of, the second you're on launch, for me, I have to get myself into a zone to feel ready to do it. Like if I don't feel it, then I'm not going to go. I have a sort of process I go through. I like to feel the wind and everything around me and just sort of get a good idea of what's going on. Even down to my mental state, I like to be quite self-aware when I'm doing these sort of things. So I try to sort of just be conscious of, I don't know, just how I'm feeling. You know, am I tired? Am I feeling alert? Am I feeling happy, sad? Like, how are these things going to affect me when it comes to flying? Because within reason, a lot of these sports are quite easy. When it, like, there's a few principles they follow, you stick to them, they're easy. But it's when the things go wrong, that's when all of these other factors come into play. So if it's when if for whatever reason you're a little bit tired on a normal day, if you were wide awake, you'd fly a line and you would be on point with everything. Your reactions would be perfect, and the little bump in the air you weren't expecting, you're able to handle perfectly. But then it's when you're a bit tired and your reactions aren't quite there, that little bump in the air that shouldn't have been a problem suddenly is a big problem because you don't react to it in time. So it's all about being fully aware of everything, basically. And it to me, it's kind of what I love about these sports, is the fact that you have to be so aware. You're so present in them that there's no room for anything else, and you're so focused on what you're doing. It's a kind of meditation. And it's kind of nice because it gives you that sort of, it gives you an inner peace, and like it sort of gives you your space, and that's it. You don't have to think, who's paying the bills at the end of the month or anything like that. You're just there. You're in your little bubble, and you can really just, you understand yourself a lot more, I think, from doing these sort of sports. Things that you wouldn't necessarily pay attention to in a normal, 9-to-5 office job lifestyle. It's all a lot more important, and you're just sort of, you become so much more aware to everything. It's quite an incredible feeling.
Yeah, you were talking about the zone, being in flow. So can you explain to the listeners, how do you bring yourself into flow? What are the aspects that actually bring you into it?
Yeah, so for me, it's interesting. Like I have to breathe. It's a really weird thing I do. I have to take a deep breath out. So, it's strange. Like I say, when I get to the launch site, I feel the air around me, and I sort of get into, I try and basically become calm. So I know what's going to happen ahead. The adrenaline's going to kick in. Everything else is going to happen. But for those moments before launch, I like to be calm. And it's just about everything melting away. You're stood there. You've clicked in. Everything's good to go. And it's just that moment. And I just like to take a deep breath out, and just I don't know. It's become a habit for me, and it's maybe it's my way of triggering flow. I don't know, but it just allows me to just let everything go, and you feel this inner peace. Everything goes still. There's like a real calm to everything around you. And even though, you're about to do something crazy and dangerous and whatever else, it doesn't feel like that. It's like the most serene moment you can have. And then once you're in it, that's it. It's always good to be aware of your surroundings, but it's almost like a hypersensitivity. You get this, it's really weird to explain to people, because it's like having tunnel vision, but then having panoramic vision at the same time.
Yeah.
Have you seen Donnie Darko? I don't know if you've seen Donnie Darko.
No.
So there's a film called, so it's a time traveling film.
Oh,
but there's a bit in it that I try to sort of relate to people, where his way of seeing into the future is he sees a wormhole coming from him in the direction that he's meant to go. And when you get into this flow state, that's kind of what you see. You've got this weird tunnel vision where you just see where you are meant to be before it's happened. It's almost like seeing the future before it's actually there. But at the same time, all of your senses are focused on everything. I guess your brain knows that there is nothing else that matters outside of that moment. So all of the energy, all of the effort that you would normally put into thinking about 100 different things while you're going about your day-to-day life is now focused on just that one moment. So you see the way the grass moves in the breeze. There's like the glint in the trees and whatever. You spot everything. And I mean, when I speed fly, you have to pick up on all of these details because it's telling you what's going on in the air. So I mean, you can't see the air; it's invisible, but it moves a lot, and how it moves can really affect how you fly. And there's all these little clues that help you along the way to give you an idea of what could be happening in that area. There could be a sunspot where there could be some thermal air there, could be lifting. So when you're going to fly through it, you're going to get a bit of a bump up or something like that. And when you're in this flow state, you pick all of these things out so much more precisely. And it's like all the information that you need available to you it's all there at once, and it's not overwhelming. Time slows down. It's like time dilation. You feel this, like every millisecond feels like it lasts forever, and you can see so much more clearly every moment. And it's like this whole idea of data processing. So you've got like a file transfer between your computer and your hard drive, and usually it's like 60 megabytes per second, and a file of a gig takes ages to download. But then all of a sudden the bandwidth gets opened up to like 120 megs per second, and it's like boom. It feels like that. It feels like the tap's been opened a bit on your perceptions and your sensitivity to the world around you, I guess. And it just allows you to process so much more information in such a short frame of time. And it's a pretty special feeling. And it's just when you're in such extreme situations, I think your brain just knows it needs to focus on this. You can't be distracted by anything outside of it because the costs are too great. It's all or nothing effectively. And it just allows you to stay in this heightened state of sensitivity. But yeah, I mean, that's really the flow state. It's being able to visualize these lines, and it almost feels like you're predicting the future by seeing ahead way more than you normally would. And yeah, it's instinctive, and there's no room for thought. That's why when I'm saying about these building these foundations and sort of making these baby steps, and you drill the basics so much that they become instinctive, so that this flow state can happen. I think if you rush the process too quickly, I don't know if it's actually as easy to get into a flow state, because you actually have to think about everything you're doing, the way you handle a wing and stuff like that. If you're still new to flying and things, you have to pay attention to how much you pull the toggles. You have to, you're always paying attention. Okay, I want to go right now. I've got to pull this much, blah, blah, blah. But once you've drilled it enough so that these all movements are just part of your thinking, that's when I think the flow state can really happen. And that's when it becomes just this instinctive, all-in-one motion, I guess. It's quite incredible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The reflexes are there. You don't have to think about them. You just react.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
is that why you love extreme sports so much?
I think so. It's weird. I don't know if I've got ADHD or something or whatever, but I've always had a problem with sitting still, and I find it very difficult to actually rest. I always feel like I have to be doing something. Even my brain, like going to sleep and stuff like that, my brain is always thinking about a million different things all at the same time. And with extreme sports, it's the one place where I feel like everything goes quiet. The rest of the time, I'm just always buzzing, and it can get quite exhausting, but I've never really been able to switch it off in any other way. And extreme sports, it just gives me that calm in my mind. There's such a level of peace you get from it. I mean, the climbs I've done when I've done free soloing and things, it's an incredible thing. You're so focused on each individual hold as you're climbing, it's just still, and it's I think it's one of those, it's one of those great moments that I can actually relax. As weird as it sounds, I mean, doing these sports, you think you'd be at your most tense, but it's actually when I actually feel the calmest. It's when I'm doing these things. So it's
And when you go to the mountains, do you usually go all by yourself, or do you go in groups? How do you like that?
So it depends what sort of experience I want. Like, I love social events, and like, for me, like, social events, I prefer to be active. So if it means we go hiking together in the mountains, awesome. You know, I love that sort of thing. And it's really good, especially with these sort of sports. I feel like it's a real bonding experience because we all get similar ideas about it. We have similar feelings when we do these things. And it's nice to get other people's opinions on it and experiences around it. And I mean, you learn a lot from each other, and it can be a really fun experience to go flying with other people, hike and fly, whatever. I actually really enjoy that. But when I want to really be at my best, that's when I prefer to be on my own. Like I said about my brain's all over the place and getting distracted. I actually find it much harder to get into like a flow state and be like really in the zone when there's other people there. I can get quite distracted by other people. Just paying attention to what they're doing, and then I forget to pay attention to myself and things like that. So yeah, for me, if I'm like a lot of the times that I've done like a first line, so if there's a route I found that I wanted to speed fly or whatever, I usually do that on my own first, just because I want to feel confident with the route and comfortable in it before I start going with other people, because I know that I'll get distracted. So I want to have it already dialed into my head how it all runs before I start bringing other people into the mix. So yeah, when it comes to that sort of thing, I prefer to do that on my own. Parkour was a different one, actually. It's one I did a lot more with friends. There was a lot more camaraderie about it, I think, because it was very underground, and it wasn't very accepted widely at the time. I mean, it was really in the early days of parkour. You know, climbing buildings and stuff like that. It's questionable on legality and stuff. I mean, trespassing is a part of it, I guess. But there was a real camaraderie about it, and the mentality towards parkour back when it was the early days. No one really knew how the sport worked. So, I mean, nowadays air sports are quite well established. You know, there's plenty of schools around the country and things like that, so you can go and learn everything you need to from them. So it's a little bit different. But with parkour, when I started, no one really knew what it was. No one knew how it was going to grow or where it was going to go. And people didn't even know how to do the vaults, like how to climb over a fence and things like the stuff, the iconic moves that you see in films and stuff now. Back when I was doing it, we were still unsure how to do it because no one really knew. It was just, we were just playing around. So having a group of friends together to be able to do that was actually really cool, because you'd all get different ideas on how to achieve the same goal. Mm-hmm. And you'd have to basically just trial and error it. And, you know, you'd give it a try. Nope, that doesn't work. What about your idea? Let's try that. Oh, that's working. We'll try that way. And it just it was how the sport grew. So it was a sport where it was I feel like it was much more social back then than it is now. I know there's a huge scene now. It's still very big. It's gotten way bigger than it was when I was doing it. But it's just, as it's grown, it's lost that, because there's now schools you can go to learn this stuff. There's gyms where there's soft padded areas that you can practice flips into and things like that. Back when I was doing it, I mean, I learned flips on grass. It's just like, that was the softest thing we had to deal with. So it was like, it's just a completely different way of learning the sport back then. So having those people around you, it was like a forum. You know, you all came together with your different ideas to try and solve how to get over obstacles, basically. So yeah, that was a different one. But yeah, I mean, back then, before it got so big and before things got more dangerous, or we started going higher up onto rooftops and things like that, it was a much more sociable activity. But yeah, like with speed flying and other things, as the danger increased, that's when it's more you want smaller groups, and then maybe just you on your own and things like that, because it is more focused. There's more at stake, so you need to really understand the risks and be concentrating enough to be able to deal with that. So yeah, that did change a bit. And then yeah, usually stuff when it came to rooftop things, it would be normally only 2 or 3 people max sort of thing, rather than like a big gathering or anything like that.
Do you think it's more competitive now?
Yeah, it's strange because I still enjoy doing parkour, and I train it because of the benefit it has to other areas of my life. In terms of agility and being able to handle situations, if I have a dodgy landing with a speed wing, I can roll out of it, and I can move because of parkour. It's helped me to be able to deal with other things. But part of the reason I don't really deal with the scene so much and I'm not more involved in it anymore is because it sort of went from this time where everyone was together, and I traveled around Europe by literally sending a message to someone in a random country I didn't know saying, hey, I do parkour. And they'd be like, awesome, come stay at my place. And that it was that sort of thing, because it was so small. Everyone wanted to learn from everyone, and they wanted the sport to grow. And it's kind of like we created our own monster, because it got to the point where it got so big that people like Red Bull, for example, caught onto it, and then they started making events. And then that's when it started getting competitive, and sponsorships started to get involved and things. And then they set up teams that sort of competed against each other and whatever else. And it sort of became more of a commercial sport. And when it did that, it lost touch with the days where, you could message someone in a random country and be like, hey, I do parkour, let's hang out. It sort of went from that world to very different, and it just became big. I think any sport's natural evolution is going to go like that. As it becomes more popular, more people get involved, and it dilutes those bonds between people just because there's so many people doing it. So it happens, and then competition comes through, and sports become something that it does become about competition. It does become about being the best and whatever else. So yeah, it's going to go that way, I think, regardless of what sport you end up in. It's just whether you just started out or whatever. Just think as it grows, I think that's just the natural evolution of different sports.
Have you ever competed?
No, not in. For me, competition isn't really something I enjoy. It's saying that I am actually going to be competing this year. I'm going to be doing some hike and fly paragliding competition.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, but competition is something that I don't like. When I'm dealing with extreme sports, I don't like having that added pressure. I already know that what I'm doing is dangerous, and I don't want to feel like I have to best someone by stepping outside of my limits. Sometimes it pays off, and I think in some respects competition can be very healthy, and it can help push you when you don't know where your limits really are. I think sometimes it can give some people that extra boost they need to prove to themselves that they're more capable than they are, and I think it can be really useful for that. I don't know, for me personally, I just don't feel like that's how I grow when I learn my sports, and when I make progress. I'm a lot more calculated about it, and I try to be more rational about it. And I think with competition, it becomes more of an emotional drive than anything else. And I think it can be good and bad. I think in some respects, that emotional drive can override rational thinking, and suddenly you're doing something way more dangerous than you would if you were just on your own, just having fun. So I think in some respects, for me, competition I don't really enjoy. But I'm trying to the reason I'm doing this competition this year is actually because I want to try and not to take it as a serious competition. Not like I want to be first, but I just want to take it as an experience. I want to just go there, meet awesome new pilots, learn from other people, and just fly and see what happens. For me, it's more just another way of growing within sport, where I'm not taking it too seriously. So that's the way I'm trying to, like, it's, for me, it's a new step for me. Like, I've always been against competition, and this is sort of a first for me where I'm like, actually, why not see where it leads you, you know?
Maybe you like it, and maybe you will attend more. You never know.
So I don't know. Like, I'm very competitive with myself. Like, I'm quite self-critical, and I'll analyze everything I do and feel like I could have done it better, and I want to do better than I did last time and things like that. But I don't know how I'll handle a competition so much. So it'll be a new experience, and it'll be good to learn something from it, I guess. So.
Luis, to be able to do all these sports, you need to have a certain mental strength. So what does mental strength mean to you?
I mean, for me, I think there's a couple of things. I think being adaptable, I think, is really important. I think being able to deal with unpredictable situations coming your way is important. It's like crucial to mental strength. I think, you know, you can have a plan of how your life's going to go, but that one thing that turns up you weren't expecting can throw it all out the window. And I think mentally strong people, they're able to deal with those hits, and they'll see them come in or whatever, and they'll be able to adapt to that situation rather than thinking this is the plan I've got all along, I've got to try and stick to it. They'll take on board what's coming in and be like, okay, how do I work with this? So I think adaptability is a really useful part of mental strength. I think having an honest image of yourself can be quite useful as well. I think if you have an unrealistic view of who you are or what you can do and things like that, I think that will catch people out a lot. So I think for you to be mentally strong, you need to know your limits, where they are, and what that allows you to work with, I guess. And when you don't know those things, you're sort of left a bit lost. So I think it's nice to sort of have an understanding of where your limits are and be realistic about that. And in combination with being adaptable, it's sort of you know what your skills are, and now how do I make this work with a new situation, sort of thing. So for me, that's, I guess, where mental strength would come from.
And what do you think? How does mental training help other athletes? How could it help athletes in general?
I mean, I guess this is something we were speaking about before, where up to a point, physical abilities become almost the same. So when it comes to actually having an edge over the competition or whatever else, it then comes down to your mentality towards that. So I think with mental training and mental conditioning, it gives you that ability to handle situations better. I think, you know, nerves or, you know, you might have a bit of an ego issue. You know, if you've got that competition, there might be a bit of an ego going on. I think having self-awareness and mental awareness and mental training, I think, gives you that ability to handle those situations much better. And I think a lot of the time when it comes to competitions or performing in sports, you can almost be your own worst enemy by overthinking a situation. You know, it's one of those things where you can be the best trained athlete in the world. You know, you could have, you know, for me, it could be, I've done millions of jumps. I've done this jump a million times. But then when you're stood up on the edge of that building, looking at the jump that's exactly the same size, it comes down to my mentality, whether I can do it or not. You know, it's for me, that's where this mental training comes in, is where it's knowing your abilities and being able to trust your abilities. And I think that can make the difference, especially, you know, in races and competitions and things like that. It's the one that doesn't doubt themselves that's always going to be able to go that bit harder than the one that's sort of second guessing themselves and things like that. And again, with like flow state, I think being able to get into that flow state where everything's instinctive, it's an efficiency thing. You know, your ability to perform comes down to how efficient your mind and body works together. And if they aren't quite in harmony, that's where you lose out. And I think with mental training, where you're able to synchronize both and make it work as one unit, it becomes instinctive. I think that's when you're going to perform at your best. You can't get better than that. So yeah, I think mental training is actually a pretty useful tool just for being at your best when you need to be at your best, effectively. So yeah.
So what tip could you give other athletes?
To learn your limits, but never stop trying to push them. You know, you don't overstep your boundaries too quickly. You know, really focus on building a foundation in whatever you're doing. I think the fundamentals of any sport are critical, and it's like I was saying about this instinctive, making things instinctive. It all comes down to repetition. So if you've spent a lot of time really drilling the basics, you know, that shows. And I think those that try to run before they can walk are the ones that, you know, they'll look great for their moment, but outside of that, that's where the versatility gets lost. So for someone who's got the fundamentals drilled, it gives them this ability to adapt. You know, you've got all of your tools in your toolbox, so to speak, so that you can actually then do something with that. It's not you just have one thing you can do. You can actually be a bit more flexible. So I think if you were starting out in a sport, I think it's important to really drill the fundamentals over and over again until they become second nature. And then that just gives you it. I think that'll free up more mental space to learn more in a comfortable environment. You've got the basics drilled, so you don't have to worry about those things. Then you can learn the next step and so on and so forth. And you just repeat that process of just drilling it in so that for you, it gives you confidence. You know, if you've done something once, you don't know if you can do it again. But if you've done that thing 100 times, you feel a lot more certain that you'll be able to repeat that result. So I think for anyone getting involved in sports, I think, just start by really working on the foundation of what you're learning. And also don't necessarily just stick to what you're taught. You know, go out and do your own research. There's going to be aspects that aren't discussed that you might learn better from. Things that might help, they might carry over to other areas of your hobbies. So I think if you broaden your horizons a bit and just look outside of the box towards other areas of learning, I think that will help a lot. And just give you a bit more versatility and ability to adapt. And I think that makes you a better all-round athlete for sure.
Yeah. Okay, 2 more questions. What is your favorite saying?
So potis sum. It's a bit of a weird one. It came about a long time ago through René Descartes' cogito ergo sum. So I think, therefore I am. But potis sum means I am able. And for me, it's just this constant reminder that I haven't reached my limits yet. So within reason, whatever comes my way, I can handle. It just gives me that reminder that, you know, I don't know where my limits lie. So far it's worked. So far, you know, I've been able to deal with things. And so I sort of try to remind myself that it doesn't matter what happens in life. I'm still going to be able to handle it in some respects. So that's something I try and stick to.
Nice. I like that. I like that. Really. Okay. So last question. What are your further plans for 2020? Except the competition.
Okay. Yeah. So 2020 is about getting more into para-alpinism for me. Volbiv is probably top of my list. So Volbiv is basically cross-country paragliding, where you land on top of the mountain or somewhere else, you camp for the night, and then you continue to fly the next day to cover much bigger distances than you could cover in one day. So I'm going to be spending a lot of time this summer exploring that and trying to sort of get some big distances covered, and train more high alpine routes. I plan to do a lot more high alpine speed flying this year, so climbing some of the summits in my area and then flying off of them, just finding new lines. But yeah, it's going to be a year of quite intense training. I've got my tandem license as well that I'm slowly coming to completion on. And it's basically, this is sort of the next step in a bigger project, which is a few years off yet, but it's to fly from the west to the east across the Himalayas, just the whole length so across from Pakistan through to Tibet.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So like I've been saying about, drill the fundamentals and get those foundations in so they're instinctive. That's what I'm trying to work on now, but on a larger scale. So I'm trying to just get good at high alpine flying in case I end up in high alpine environments over in the Himalayas, and also how to manage my Volbiv flying, because that's going to be a huge part of that adventure. So it's a year of training, basically. So
wow, that sounds great. Great. Yeah. Hey, and what about Red Bull X Alp?
I know. Do you know what? It is tempting. I mean, those guys are insane. They are something else. As athletes, I can't think of many that have to have the mental and physical capacity. It's just the stories I've heard of pilots falling asleep mid-air flying because they're just taking their bodies and minds to the limits with this sort of thing. And it's such an incredible adventure. I'd love to take part in it sometime, or just do my own version of it or something like that, just because it seems like an amazing adventure. But those guys, they're on another level. Their ability to fly, and I mean, these guys are sort of exhausted. They've been running for miles, and they're still launching in worse conditions than I'd ever dream of flying in. They're still up on the mountain in crazy storms. They're like, yeah, I'm still going to go. And it's crazy what these guys can do. They've just, they take the sport to another level. So it's amazing. Yeah.
All right. Hey, Luis, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate that.
No, thanks very much. I'm glad to have the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess very soon I'm going to see you down in Switzerland.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much that you joined in today. If you like, write me an email and let me know what you would like to hear in this podcast, what themes would be interesting for you. And you may share this podcast with your friends. And if you like, you may give me an evaluation here on iTunes, or please sign in to get this podcast on a regular basis. All right. See you later and talk to you soon. Bye-bye.